On this episode of Still Loading, you ask your Q's and I give you my A. Wait, that's not right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today it is the first ever live episode of the podcast. I'm recording this live right now on Twitch, and also it's the first ever Q&A episode of the podcast. I'm getting all my questions ready as I vamp on this intro, but it is the first ever Q&A, and thankfully, I was always nervous to do a Q&A episode because I never was really sure if anyone would give a shit, to be honest. Like, would I get any questions? And thankfully, you all came through. A bunch of friends of the show and a bunch of listeners came through and sent me a good chunk of questions, and I got a bunch right here. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can, and then I will plan on, hopefully, if there's people in chat that want to ask questions, feel free to ask some questions in chat, right? So, and I will set aside some time at the end of the episode to do that, to answer those questions. So to kick things off right here, my buddy TJ from The Hodder Show, from one of my podcasting friends, sent me a whole slew of questions. I want to try to answer as many of these as I can, and we'll move on. And I got a bunch of others. So his first question, out of my entire collection, as you can see on Twitch, I do have a game collection. You only see a snippet of it in here. But out of your entire collection, what's one thing you kind of regret / embarrassed, you're kind of regretful or embarrassed to have, but will never actually get rid of? And believe it or not, I don't really have anything in my collection that I'm really that embarrassed of or that regretful, because I love video game history. So even if it's a game that I hate or I wish I wouldn't have spent the money on, I don't I wish I wouldn't have spent the money on because of the gameplay itself. I still don't regret buying it because it's part of game history, then I get a little piece of that. But I would say the closest thing to it, and it's not because I actually dislike it, it's because it gets so much shit on the internet, it's the Labo. I have the first Nintendo Labo set somewhere back in the corner there, and I'm telling you, man, people give so much shit to the Nintendo Labo, and I just don't know why. It's a great little system. This is a great little game. I think it's such a fun idea. I get that it's cardboard, but man, people just gave it so much shit when it came out. And I felt like I was one of the people defending it. I'm like, this is super unique and inventive. Like, who wouldn't want this? But apparently nobody. So, they're still selling them, but Nintendo pretty quickly swept the Labo under the rug after the VR thing came out. All right, so his next one is, what's the worst game I've ever covered on the show? That's a very good question. I would say the worst one that I've ever covered is there was a game called Archon, and it was essentially battle chess, but done really shittily. It was just not fun battle chess. That's the best way I can describe it. It just was so unfun to play. I don't think I would really want to do it again. I'm good. I'm good, thanks. Any games that are his next one? Are there any games coming out that I'm excited for? I'm excited at the time of recording, and actually at the time of release, it'll not be out yet. The new Pokemon Snap game. I don't have it pre-ordered, but I kind of want to because I love Pokemon. I loved the original. So I would love to see the new one, but I just don't have the money for it at the moment, unfortunately. Could God microwave a burrito so hot that he himself could not eat? No, he's God. Come on now. Like, what kind of a question is that, TJ? Do I listen to music when I game at all? And if so, what am I usually jamming to? I don't always. It really just depends on the game. It depends on... So if it's like an MMO, or if it's Minecraft, or if it's something where there's a lot of mindless, repetitive tasks, then yeah, I'll put on music. And when I usually do put on music, it really just varies. Right, for the last couple of years, it's been chiptunes, like Hyper Potion, not even chiptunes, but a lot of not quite EDM either, but it's like electronic game sounding style. Future bass, I think, is like the closest thing to it. Hyper potions. I love hyper potions. I'll put on anything from the Game Chops record label, just about. I'll sometimes lo-fi. I do like lo-fi. If I'm in the mood for something that I can sing along to, I might do Skillet. If anyone has ever heard Skillet, I haven't listened to them in ages. They're a really good rock band. But there's what else have I Hyper Potions again, even because they've actually had some vocalists on their tracks instead of just all instrumental stuff. But that's kind of it. I mean, my music taste is all over the place, but for the last couple of years, it's been a lot of chiptune stuff. What exactly was the catalyst for starting the Still Loading podcast? Now, I actually got asked this by someone else as well, so I'm going to shout them out. Smash Brothers Gaming over on Twitter. Or not Twitter, I'm sorry, Instagram. And what was the catalyst for the podcast? I started this because I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. At my job right now. I started there a couple of years ago, and they let you listen to music while working there. And after a while of listening to music, and I've always had like I don't go for the newest flashiest stuff. So like my phone could only hold like a minuscule amount of music on it. So I would listen to the same stuff over and over again before I would have to cycle it out. And after a while, I just got tired of having to cycle things out. I got tired of listening to the same stuff over and over again. So I searched for podcasts on it. And the phone I had was actually a Windows phone. You know, we all know Android and Apple, their phones, but this was a Windows phone. With a Windows operating system, and it had Kevin Smith's podcast, Jay and Silent Bob Get Old. And I knew who Jay and Silent Bob was, but I knew who Kevin Smith was, but I never really paid that much attention to his library of work up until I started listening to his podcast. And so he started this thing, so I started listening to his podcast, and then I got hooked on a bunch of his podcasts, you know, Hollywood Babylon, Smodcast. I love his podcasts. And what really sold it for me was there, and besides him, I also listened to a podcast which I've shouted out a shitload of times called Retronauts, which is a retro gaming podcast, and they're fantastic. All the two lead guys, Jeremy and Bob, they were game journalists for a number of years, and then they're not in game journalism anymore, but they've used all those connections to be able to get to have really cool and insightful guests on their podcast, friends of theirs, sometimes game devs and professionals in the industry. It's a very good podcast. So I was listening to both of those at the same time, and Kevin Smith had a thing on one of his podcasts. I forgot which one, but it was a Q&A. It was a recorded Q&A. And I remember he went on this really inspirational rant, which I call his why not rant. And basically the idea is when you do anything creative, you want to surround yourself with the right people, right? So you don't want to surround yourself with yes people, because then all your shitty ideas are going to happen too. But you also don't want to surround yourself with no people, because then none of your good ideas will happen. You always want to surround yourself with the why not people. Just why, like you have an idea and the person's like, why not? Let's give it a shot. So someone who's kind of more in the middle, who's willing to take that risk with you, take that leap of faith with you. Just why not? Why not do this? Like, because there's a million people who are going to say, don't do that. It's a waste of your time. And why would you do? They'll ask you why you would do something. And I love that philosophy of why not? Why not do this? You know? So that was pretty much the catalyst for it. He would talk about start a podcast. He would tell everyone in the audience, just go start a podcast. And, you know, I think a lot of people took that advice because there's a lot of podcasts out there now. So that was the catalyst for the show. It was a combination of listening to Kevin Smith and listening to Retronauts. And I love video games, and the whole why not attitude kind of like it got in my head and I just couldn't get rid of it. So started this podcast, and it's been, oh gosh, it's coming up on 7 years this summer that I started it, which is crazy to think about. What is my favorite podcast? My favorite podcast kind of changes from bit to bit. I would say overall, the podcast that I consistently go back to is called James Bonding. And I'll actually there's two more questions from TJ, but I'm going to use this question to jump into someone else's because it's a good segue. Even though having to explain a segue probably isn't the best way to do it. But it's a podcast called James Bonding, and it's with these two guys, Matt Myra and Matt Gorley. And both of them are fantastic podcasters. Matt Gorley specifically is one of my favorite podcasters of all time. I love his work. I love listening to what he does. He's one of the funniest podcasters out there. He's one of the funniest people out there. And he just seems so genuine and down to earth. And that really resonates with me. So I first discovered him through James Bonding, and I love James Bonding. It's probably the one podcast I go back to over and over and over again and re-listen to old episodes just because I love it so much. And the reason why this ties in with another question, Smash Brothers Gaming asked another one. Am I a James Bond fan? Or he said, you seem like a James Bond fan. Are you? And then follow-up James Bond question. Would you ever do commentary on Bond movies? So one, I'm a gigantic James Bond fan. Love the James Bond movies. Have not read all the books, but I'm a giant James Bond fan. You can see that I've interviewed Raymond Benson, one of the official authors of the Bond books. He did the books from the mid to late 90s to early 2000s. And I've been doing a semi-formal James Bond series where I cover a James Bond game with a friend and then we go on. And that's been a lot of fun. And his second question is, his follow-up question to that is, would I ever do commentary on the Bond movies? That would be a lot of fun. I don't know if I could. Now I'm not talking about legally, but I just don't know if I'd be able to vamp for an entire movie. It's different when it's something like this where I'm constantly getting fed good solid questions, good solid prompts. And I don't know if I would be able to do that with a movie. Two, it doesn't really fit in with the theme of my podcast because I'm a video game podcast. So I have to find some tangential way of going into it. And a commentary episode would be just a full commentary of a movie, and we wouldn't have time to talk about a game at all. So I kind of don't think I'd do it for the podcast, but if I ever start a James Bond podcast or a movie podcast, which I have thought of, by the way, I've been toying with the idea of doing a martial arts movie podcast, and I'm counting James Bond in that because that was one of the first times you saw any sorts of martial arts in American cinema, because there wasn't really a lot back when Bond first started coming out. So that's the two questions from Smash Brothers Gaming. He also asked the Catalyst question. He has a couple more that I'll get to later on, but the two final questions from TJ here. Do I still enjoy baths? For those who listened to my crossover episode with him, the first time TJ and I really met each other, quote unquote, I was on his podcast 2 or 3 years ago, and I forget why I brought it up, but I just love taking baths. Everyone else takes showers. I like baths. I like being able to soak in a tub. It's so relaxing, and I don't know why no one else does it. In fact, funny, callback, Matt Gorley, the guy I mentioned before from James Bonding, he likes taking baths, and he has to defend it all the time on the James Bonding podcast. So I'm standing in solidarity with Matt Gorley that baths are good, and you deserve to relax and pamper yourself, okay? Pamper yourself, damn it. All right, and then TJ's final question is, who is my favorite Canadian? Well, it's clearly Nathan Fillion. I mean, were you expecting you, TJ, from Canada? No, I'm just messing with you. No, I like all Canadians, all right? They're all my family because they're all nice. Every Canadian I've met has been a gorgeous gem of a human being. But okay, so the next set of questions. Some of these are actually from my wife. These next couple are from my wife Courtney. So her question is, if it were a zombie apocalypse, what item is directly to your right that I could use as a weapon? It would be this microphone stand that is holding up this microphone right now. And honestly, I'm not upset by that. I'm pretty happy with that as a weapon. Won't lie. If I could eat one, and then her next question, if I could eat one food and drink for the rest of your life, what would it be? So there's two things with this. One, it would be pizza, hands down. You get fruit, sort of. You get dairy, definitely. Not healthy dairy, but dairy. You get bread. Then if I put stuff on it, then this might be too non-specific of a question, because can I get toppings on these pizzas? Do I have to eat the same exact pizza? Does it have to be plain for the rest of my life? Or could I switch it up with a little bit of pepperoni, or with some ham and pineapple, or with some sausage and onion? Is that an option? I don't know. either way, if I had to choose one, it would be plain pizza because I'm boring. For a drink, if it was something healthy, it'd be kombucha because I've been hooked on kombucha lately. If it's something that I would be able to drink that's unhealthy that wouldn't affect me negatively for the rest of my life, it'd be Mountain Dew. But Mountain Dew would give me diabetes real fast if that's all I was drinking. And then her final question is, when I first got into video games, what did I want to be when I grew up? So I got into video games really, really young. But when I would say that I really became like a gamer, quote unquote, I would say I was around like 10 or 11, I want to say. And what did I want to be when I was 10 or 11? I actually wanted to be a travel agent for a long time because I loved the idea of traveling. Now I don't like traveling like at all. Like I like driving places, but like the idea of flying somewhere, and it's not even flying itself. It's just all the anxiety of planning. It's literally the planning that gets me. All right, so that was her question. I think I wanted to be a travel agent though when I was 10 or 11. My buddy Dexter Morrill, who was actually on an episode a couple months ago, back in November, and also back in November and October when he came on. He asked if I was sucked into Videoland, like from Captain N the Game Master. It's an old cartoon for those who've never seen it. What characters would you want as sidekicks? So in Captain N the Game Master, this kid named Kevin gets sucked into Videoland, and it's just inhabited with video game characters. So who would I want to be like my partners in crime? I'd have to say it would be Master Chief, Mario, just because it's Mario. Like even though I'm pretty sure I'd go with Master Chief over Mario if like I needed to defend myself. It's Mario. You have to go with that. And Mega Man, because I love Mega Man. My buddy James from the No Geeks Allowed podcast, which fortunately they've been on a hiatus for a little while, but I love their stuff. When making a PB&J, what do you spread first? So I use one knife so that way I don't waste another utensil to like make a PB&J. So I always go with the jelly first because it's easier to wipe off than the peanut butter. Thoughts on Frisbees? They're Frisbees and they're fun. Favorite mythological monster or cryptozoology thing? That's a fun question, actually. I would have to say I'd probably like the Leviathan. I always liked the idea of a giant sea dragon. I always thought that was cool. What color lightsaber would you rock and why is it purple? Well, one, it would probably be purple, not going to lie. Or blue. Actually, blue's my favorite color. But purple's not bad. Why would it be purple? I don't know. Purple's cool. Fuck you. I don't know what else to tell you. What's a game you've tried to get into countless times and have failed but will try again anyway? This one's a little controversial, won't lie. One of the games that I've tried to get into so many times, but I just can't do it. It is Skyrim. I cannot get into Skyrim. I don't know what it is. The controls bother me on a functional level. Like I don't feel in control of my character, and it irks me. I don't know what it is. I know it's controversial because Skyrim is still is immensely popular, but for some reason, I just can't seem to get into it. What video game universe would you like to be an NPC in? Whew, that's a cool one. I would say if I were an NPC in some random universe, in some random game world, I would not be the Mushroom Kingdom, because for those OGs who read the original Super Mario Brothers manual, which I'm not actually OG, I just know this after the fact, the inhabitants of the Mushroom Kingdom got turned into all the blocks that Mario keeps destroying. So he's just committing like genocide of his people. So I don't want to be one of them. I would say I would want to be, I don't know, man. You know what? Donkey Kong. I love Donkey Kong Country. I love, even though I'm bad at that game. I've never been it. Donkey Kong 64. I love that world. I'd be inhabited there. That'd be fun. King K. Rool's a ridiculous bad guy. You're not really that threatened by him. I'm down for that. And then his last question that I'm willing to answer, he asked another one I don't know if I want to answer. If you had to have a team of 5 heroes from your own video game adventures, who would they be? That kind of goes with what Dexter's was. It was, like Mario, Master Chief, Mega Man, and so I need two more then. I would want Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn because that game's fucking amazing. I love Horizon Zero Dawn. One more. Who would be a great ally? Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank. If I can take the bundle, I'll take both. But if I had to choose one, I'd go probably Ratchet. And that's the last of James. Now on to Britt, who was on an app. She's a listener of the show. Britt asked, "Fave retro game in my collection, and what's a game that I've been looking for the longest?" What's the game that I've been looking the longest for? So my favorite retro game in my collection is probably Chrono Trigger. I love Chrono Trigger. It's got one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. And it's got one of the most advanced battle systems for like an old RPG. That battle system feels refreshingly modern compared to a lot of the other stuff that was super popular at the time. I love Chrono Trigger. A game that I've been searching for a while. So there's a couple that I've found but couldn't afford, so I'm hoping that counts. There's a game called Metal Storm for the NES, which is like, it's a couple $100 for the cart. It's really expensive. But what I love about it is that if you and I've never played it, I've just watched people play it, and it just looks really cool. And you play as like this dude in a mech suit, and you can flip, like you hit a button and it flips gravity upside down, so you can stick to the ceiling, and then you have to platform and shoot. It's a shoot 'em up basically. You have to work your way through the level upside down, and then you can hit the button and it'll correct gravity to be right side up. But you have to kind of manipulate that to platform your way through certain sections too. So it's not just like, let me jump to the top, fight, now jump to the bottom and fight. Sometimes you have to dodge enemies and dodge areas by jumping and flipping gravity, which is a really cool mechanic. And I wish, which I thought was incredibly ahead of its time for when that game came out. I don't know when. Actually, you know what? Let me look up real quick. When did Metal Storm come out for the NES? It was for the NES, 1991. At least it says initial release date. I don't know if that's Japan. I guess I could click on Wikipedia, get some updates. Yeah, so it came out in 1991 in North America and in 1992 in Japan. That's interesting. Normally it's the other way around for those games, for older games. But all right, so that's all the questions I got from Facebook. Let's jump on over to some of the questions I got from Instagram. So I already answered 3 of Smash Brothers Gaming's questions. It was, what was the catalyst? Am I James Bond? You seem like a James Bond. You seem like a James Bond fan, are you? And then would I ever do Bond commentaries? But his first question that he asked me is, do I have a background in writing? The way your show flows, it feels like you do. I definitely do not. I am not a good writer. At least I don't think I'm a good writer, I should say. I actually struggled with writing and not reading, but I always struggled with writing in college. I actually even had to take a remedial course, which I'm not going to lie, it was the biggest joke of a class of my life. I don't regret taking it because it taught me it gave me a better grasp of fundamentals that I probably should have had, but I've never been a good writer. Then the final for that like remedial writing course in college was literally write 3 paragraphs. That's it. That was the final. I had to write a 3-paragraph essay. It was ridiculous. Question from Mbinstaface on Instagram. What game system do I love the most and why? I actually did an episode on this a while ago. I would say the game system that I really, really love is the PlayStation 2. I played it so much as a kid. Now, if you're asking me like which one kind of more in retrospect it's weird because I think I like the PlayStation 2 the most, but for some reason the Super Nintendo just does it for me. I love the Super Nintendo, but I think I have to give it to the PS2. I spent more time with it. I spent a lot more time with my PS2, and I love the PS2. I mean, I love the Super Nintendo. The games are fantastic, but I just spent more time on my PS2, mainly because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the N64 at first, and then like junior high to high school, I played PS2. That was those like 4 or 5 years. It was all PS2. It was a lot of fun. Okay, so actually, one of the mods of this Twitch channel, inside joke for anyone who watches Twitch, why do you raw dog your Switch controllers? A little context so that way people don't wonder what the hell he's talking about. I was streaming Super Mario, not All Stars. I was streaming Super Mario 3D World / Bowser's Fury, and there was a section of the level where I had to switch over to the Joy-Cons on the Switch, and I joked around about how like I didn't have the actual, like, there's like the wrist straps for that you slide onto the side. I kind of joked around that since I didn't have that, I was raw dogging the Switch controllers. So that's where that comes from. So why do I do it? It's because I'm lazy. There we go. So let's jump over. We have question from another question from Instagram, Kaufman Lane. What's one series you regret not getting into? I would say it's the Persona series. I've played Persona 3 a little bit, but if I had like, just literally just popped in my head, the first series is Persona. I've heard so many good things about Persona 3, 4, and 5, and I've played a good chunk of 3, but I've heard 4 and 5 are fantastic, like some of the best games ever. And I really need to give them a legitimate shot, and I just haven't gotten around to it. That's just the reality of it. I just have not gotten around to trying it out. I own actually 3 and 4. I don't own 5 yet, but I own 3 and 4. It's Persona, man. I really love to give that a shot. I'd really love to try that. I only got a couple more questions lined up for this. So if anyone is in Twitch chat has any questions they feel like asking, get them prepped and you can start sending them. If not, I'm not going to call the stream because we've only been going for 40 minutes, but we can I can then switch over to some gameplay or something like that. So if there's no questions, no problem. The last two questions, though, from Jesse LaSpook on Instagram, are there any indie game developers that I've been cheering for? That one, I kind of just cheer for all indie game devs. I know that's kind of a throwaway answer, kind of like a cop-out answer, but even if it's an indie game that I have no interest in playing, it's just the fact that someone took a chance and made it. I think it's kind of cool. If I had to choose one, it would be Yacht Club Games, because I love Shovel Knight. I adore Shovel Knight so much. And also, what is the name? Moon Studios. They did Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisp. Though I don't know how much you can consider them indie, because I don't know if Microsoft owns them or not, but they were considered indie for a while. So yeah, I would say Yacht Club Games, Moon Studios, and whoever made The Messenger. I've been playing The Messenger on stream and I'm hooked. Like, I'm probably going to be playing this on stream once I stop recording, because it's so good. It's such a good game. My final question for the Q&A is, what was the biggest plot twist or game with the biggest plot twist? Spoiler or spoiler-free? For a spoiler-free one, the game with a big plot twist that like really stuck with me, that really hit home, I would say, is the original BioShock. I'll keep that one spoiler-free. I won't say what the plot twist is, but holy shit, that was wild. Yeah, so that's all the questions I had lined up. I'm very happy with how many questions that people sent me. So thank you everyone who wrote in a question. I don't see any in Twitch chat, which, like I said, is a-okay. I'm just very happy with how many people asked questions and sent them to me. That was really nice of you. And it made me feel good because people actually gave a shit. So that will do it for this episode. So thank you all for listening. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. You can also email me, stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a number of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Even just $1 a month will help grow the show. And honestly, the best way to support the show is just give it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because that helps other people find it. The more reviews I get, the more the algorithm pushes it out there. But the most important shout out I have is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of children receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to go support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that will do it. This is kind of like the first of like a mini episode, because this is actually going on for under an hour. So That was my first Q&A, first live Q&A at that. This was done live on Twitch. So if you want to check me out on Twitch, Still Loading Pod on Twitch, that should do it, guys. So thank you all once again for listening, and I will see you all next time.